Blessings, everyone. This is Reverend Aphren with the Four Pillars Temple. So I'm coming to you today because I want to talk about the topic of prayer beads and also the topic of devotion. So for those of you who follow along with the Four Pillars Temple and now our newly created tradition, you know that we like to use a lot of devotional work. The devotional work is the foundation of our practice. And so for us, one of the major components of devotion, one of the major things that we do is engaging in the use of prayer beads, prayer instruments. And so as you can see, I'm wearing a set of prayer beads today, and I'm going to talk about some of the beads I have sitting here before me and the ones that I'm wearing, and we're going to talk a little bit about what we use them for and kind of what the deal is with all of that. So for some of you, you may have been following along and you may have had access to our lay practice manual. In our lay practice manual, we talk about the use of prayer beads as part of our regalia. And so in the Four Pillars Temple and in our tradition, we wear the prayer beads as a symbol of our membership to the temple. And this is not just for the purposes of showing membership and involvement, but it's also for a practical purpose. It serves the purpose of being useful in using toward our devotional practice. Now, in paganism and in Wicca, you may have come across the discussion about prayer beads or may have heard about prayer beads. Now, traditionally in Wicca, they refer to the prayer beads as witches' ladders, and oftentimes they're kind of depicted in a singular strand like this, right? Now, obviously the ones that I'm wearing are not in a single strand, but they are as a loop. The beads that I'm wearing currently have 108 beads, and for those of you who may be familiar with Eastern religion or Eastern philosophy, 108 beads is the same number of beads that the Buddhists use in their mala. And the reason why we've chosen 108 for our beads is because 13, which represents the 13 full moons in a year, 8, which represents the 8 sabbats, and 13 times 8 is 104, plus 4 elements is 108. So we use 108 beads as well. And this, for us, especially since here at Four Pillars, we're focused not only on devotion, but the relationship with the 4 elements plays an important role in the work that we do. So the beads that I'm wearing right now are made out of a semi-precious stone. I'm not sure, I think they're carnelian. And on the beads is a pendant, and you might not be able to see from where you are, but on the beads is a pentacle pendant, okay? So in our temple, the type of bead is not important. The material that the beads are made out of is not important. How the strand of beads itself is strung is not important. What is important is the things that we as each individual practitioners need in order to feel that positive relationship and to have that devotional mindset when using the beads. So for me, I chose this because I loved this color, and it really resonates with me as a spiritual person, so I chose this color. Other people in my temple have chosen blue that looks very oceanic. I have one member of our temple that chose each of the 4 elements as colors and divided the 108 into 4 parts and had a different color of element for each of the 4 parts. So whatever it is that you need in order for you to feel like these are meaningful to you, I do recommend that you use a pentacle as the dependent on the beads. Now, my pentacle actually has a clip on it that allows me to unclip it and take it off. So that way, what I can do is, if I want to say, let's say I'm only doing 8 or 10 or 12 or however many recitations of a prayer, I can take this and clip it anywhere on my beads, and that can become my counter that helps me to know when I've reached the number I was trying to reach, and I can stop the prayer. So I would recommend doing something like that, but it's not necessary for our beads. Now, I'm going to show you several other strands of beads, and we're going to talk a little bit about maybe some things to keep in mind when you're stringing or preparing your beads. So first of all, the beads that I have are made of stone, so they are a bit heavy. Also, these beads I strung them myself, and they have knots in between each of the beads. And so there's a couple of reasons for that. The knots in between the beads actually helps with counting, because you can kind of get your fingers in there and it makes it a little bit easier to count. Also, the knots in the beads gives the strand a little bit more structure and a little bit more security. I'd hate to see someone's beads come apart in ritual and then people are slipping on stray beads and falling and all kinds of stuff's happening. So for me, by knotting in between each bead, it adds some more security and strength to the beads, but it also makes it much easier for me to get my fingers in there and to count them. Now, when using the beads, this is specifically my teaching in the Four Pillars Temple and tradition. When using the beads, you can use whichever hand you'd like to use, right? Now, in our tradition, we have this understanding of the gods and the universe as being dual, right? Very similar in most of Wicca, male god, female goddess, yin and yang, that kind of thing. And so in our temple, we understand that the dominant side, which for most of us is the right side, is yang or masculine, and the non-dominant is, or I don't like to use the word submissive, but the non-dominant hand or the non-dominant side is yin or feminine. And so if you're working to say prayers or do any sort of devotional work where you're engaging in a yin principle activity, something like introspection, insight, awareness, internal cultivation of ideas or beliefs or emotions, that's on the yin side. So that would involve maybe using your non-dominant hand. So if I were, let's say, saying prayers or repeating prayers for compassion, let's say, maybe I'd use my left hand. Let's say that I was doing more active work and I was doing something like manifestation, or I was doing something like something that was assertive or passionate or motivational, right? Something with that active energy, that would be on the yang side. And so I would use my right hand and I would focus my energy with my right hand. So it's important that we set intention when we're using these beads and understanding why we're using them and the way that we're using them. Now, in addition to using the left or the right hand, choosing how we want to hold the beads. In one form of Buddhism, Tibetan Buddhism, they believe that you don't use your finger, your index finger, when you're counting the beads. So you wouldn't lay the beads on your hand like this. You would actually lift your finger like this, and you would use your thumb, and you would count them like this, right? So if that feels right to you, you're welcome to do it. If you want to go so far as to say, well, the index finger is associated with this planet in terms of numerology, in terms of palmistry, so maybe I want to use my ring finger instead. So maybe you would count using your ring finger, because the ring finger represents something for you in terms of the palmistry aspect of it, and maybe you want to incorporate that energy. You could always do that too. And with palmistry, I know that each knuckle has a different thing as well. So if you really want to go that deep into it, you're welcome to do that. If you choose to simply just hold it like this, you can do that. Now, some people will take their beads and they'll hold them at their heart, because holding them at the heart helps to connect with the heart center, the heart chakra. So doing that maybe will be helpful. Sometimes people will take their other hand and they will sit the beads in the hand like this, and you'll hold that hand down like at your solar plexus, and you will count the beads with this hand as you're using this hand to support it. Or you could simply just hold it, you know, like this. You could hold it up, you can hold it down, whatever it is that you feel comfortable doing. Oftentimes I hold mine down, whatever, you know, you need to do. But again, understanding what your intention is and what you're trying to get from this devotional practice, I think, is really important. Now, you might decide that you don't want to pray or chant all 108 beads, and that's okay. So that's why I like to use the marker, right? I have my clip marker here. If you don't want to use a pentacle, maybe choosing something that's appropriate to you. Let's say that you feel really drawn or really connected to water elements, for example. Maybe you want to use blue beads, right? And maybe as your pendant, instead of using a pentacle, maybe you'll choose to use a seashell, right? And for you, when you pick the beads up, you say to yourself, or you'll recognize psychospiritually, that you're moving into your spiritual place, and you can sit down and work devotion using this tool, right? Conversely, if you're really interested in you know, the element of earth, for example, maybe you use green beads or brown beads, and then maybe for your pendant you use a tree or the tree of life symbol or something like that, that helps to evoke for you what it means to be spiritual and what it means to be a devoted person to your practice, right? Now, when we're chanting or when we're praying reciting these prayers, what prayers might we use? Right? Now, there are so many different options of prayers that we can use. Something as simple as like the circle chant or the goddess chant, right? Isis, Astarte, Diana, Hecate, Demeter, Kali, and Ana. You might want to use like the goddess chant. She changes everything she touches, and everything she touches changes. You might want to use an elemental chant, right? The earth, the air, the fire, the water, return, 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 return. And you might want to repeat that over and over and over again. That can be really grounding and really great. So those are all things that you could potentially use. You could choose or pick up your own prayer or mantra that you want to use. Some people use Buddhist mantras. Some people without a cultural context might not understand why we're using them. The mantras, right? Something like the mantra of compassion, Om Mani Padme Hum, or something like the Heart Sutra, Gate Gate Paragate Parasam Gate Bodhiswaha, or even something like the Vajrasattva mantra, which is a 100-syllable mantra, and that gets pretty complicated when you're doing 100 syllables 108 times, right? So it's pretty lengthy. But these are all options to help you personally to find out what it is that's connecting you to a deeper and more spiritual place, and using the tool that you wear with you in ritual to connect you to that. And then when you wear it again in ritual, you're connecting again and again and again to that spiritual depth that you're looking for. So these are all really important things that we need to be mindful of when we're using a tool like the prayer beads, right? Or the witch's ladder, whatever you choose to call it. So I'm going to show you a couple of examples of other prayer beads. Again, this is the one that we use in the Four Pillars Temple. This set that I showed you a moment ago is very small, but if you look here, it has different elemental colors, and then larger beads. It has smaller beads and larger beads, and then at the one end there's a pentacle, which I know it's hard to see. One end there's a pentacle, and at the other end there is a gemstone. So I just used opalite. And this is more of an example of a witch's ladder. It's a single strand of beads that you can use. This strand of beads was developed by a woman named Rebecca Doolin back in 2008. So I wonder if you might be able to type in like Wiccan prayer beads, Rebecca Doolin, and find it. It was a PDF, and I used the PDF as a way to design these, and I came up with my own beads. But of course, each of the colors is related to each of the 4 elements, and then you have the bigger beads in the middle that have different things, and there are different prayers that you say with each bead. So compared to the 4 pillars beads, where maybe you say the same prayer on each bead, you would say different prayers on each bead with something like this. And so in some ways, the witch's ladder is helpful to get you to remember your prayers by saying, okay, well, this is a red bead, so on the red beads I say, and kind of go with it, right? So maybe it helps you remember your prayers, and it maybe keeps you in a certain rotation when you're praying. So check that out. Rebecca Doolin, Doolin, 2008, she came up with these prayer beads, and I absolutely love them. Here is an example of a traditional set of Buddhist prayer beads. So you'll see there's a spoked wheel as the pendant right here on the end by my pinky, and these beads are very big. The ones that I got here, I think these are 8 millimeters, the ones that I use for ritual. These ones I think are 10 or 12, so they're very big. Now, it's recommended that for men, because men have larger hand sizes a lot of times, getting larger beads is much more comfortable for men. So for me to use this, it's very, very comfortable. Now, this is also a stretchy, so I can wrap it around my hand and stretch it, and it is very comfortable to wear. They're larger beads, so they're very comfortable to count. But again, this is 108. I would recommend, if you're looking to get a set of beads and you don't want to string your own, that you could buy a set of plain traditional quote-unquote Buddhist prayer beads that don't have a tassel, and you could put your own pendant or your own tassel or your own, pentacle on it as well. So you have that. Now with my beads, like I mentioned, I tied a knot in between each bead. That's really hard to do unless you have a knotting tool. You can buy them, they're like 20 bucks on Amazon or at the craft store. That made it really easy for me to tie the knots in between. You can choose not to tie the knots like I mentioned earlier. This one does not have the knots tied in it. That's all that I think I want to say about that. So the last set of beads that I want to mention to you is a set of beads that I got from an organization called the First Kingdom Church of Asphodel. The First Kingdom Church of Asphodel is a neo-pagan group. They have a monastic order through the church, which is located at Cauldron Farm, which is located in Massachusetts, and the order is called the Order of the Horae, Horae, I believe is how it's spelled. Order of the Horae, which is a Greek word, and it means hours. So the Order of the Horae is a pagan monastic group, and they have some wonderful prayer beads, and these ones I bought from the Order of the Horae. And they are a bit expensive, and this is not a paid promotion, but I absolutely love them because they have wooden, they have glass, and they have, I think, semi-precious stone, versions of them, and they come with their own set of prayers as well. So if you look, and I'm going to come a little closer so that you can see what these beautiful beads look like. So if you look here, these beads are each hand painted, they're hand strung, and each one of them has a different meaning. So you'll see like here there's like 3 big beads and there's a series of small beads. Each one of them is different colors. And so this is not the full 108 size, but it does have their own prayers. And these were purchased from the First Church of Asphodel. I'll put the link to their organization for ordering if you're interested in that in the bio there, so that you can see that. But these are really great. I love using these. This set that I got is called the Healer's Prayer Beads, and it's the wooden set. So they're very light, they're very easy to use, they're very comfortable, they have spacer beads in between them, they're very comfortable. I don't use these ones in Four Pillars Temple rituals because they are not official regalia, but these are a great tool if you're looking to engage in a spiritual practice, devotional practice with beads. There are some really great resources. I love the idea of using prayer beads. I think that, just like with the witch's, when I mentioned earlier about witch's ladder, a lot of times the witch's ladder is not necessarily beads, but what it is cords, like ritual cords that they would knot for knot magic. And so I like the witch's ladder idea as for the use of the cords. And in knot magic, when you tie the knot, you're binding in the energy, and when you release the knot, you're releasing the energy, right? This is obviously different, but when you use the beads, every time you're praying the prayer, you're actually allowing the energy to come into the beads, and the more that you do it, the more energy comes into the beads. And so I would recommend choosing maybe a core, or as the Tibetans would say, a root mantra that you're using regularly with a single set of beads. And maybe if you have a different set of beads that you want to use for another purpose, another mantra or another prayer, do that, because you're imbuing energy into these beads when you do that. So here are a couple of examples. If you are interested in looking into pagan prayer beads as like your own practice outside of the Four Pillars Temple or tradition, there are some really great books available, one of which is by John Michael Greer. I can't remember what it's called. Maybe it's just called Pagan Prayer Beads. There's another one that I saw that came out recently about pagan prayer beads. So there are so many different options. If you want some maybe non-pagan books, there's another great book called Garland of Advice, I believe it's called, and it's a book written by a Tibetan Lama who wrote about the mala and how you pray it and kind of some of their things. So if you're interested in looking up some history or some other organizations about it, if you're interested in looking up maybe the Catholic version of the Rosary and kind of how that whole thing started and what it was used for, that's always really great to look into too. But using prayer beads is a fantastic practice, and it is truly a great way to ground your practice and to kind of keep you engaging in a spiritual practice regularly. The Four Pillars Temple has written a devotion ritual which uses the basic ritual outline in the Wiccan faith, but instead of like calling the quarters, we just honor the quarters. So we say prayers to each of the four directions, asking for blessings in each of the four directions. When it comes to doing the invocation of the god and goddess, we don't invoke the god and goddess, but we use that time in the ritual to honor the god and goddess. And then in the part of the ritual where we would do like our ritual act or our spiritual observance, if we're celebrating a holiday, we would do the spiritual or holiday celebration at that time, or if we're doing magic, we do the magic ritual. That is the time in the devotion ritual where we would engage in some spiritual activity, whether it be for divination, whether it be devotion, using our prayer beads, or what have you. So I always encourage people, if you're engaging in the practice of using prayer beads, consider using them in ritual or in a ritualized prayer format, just like the Four Pillars tradition devotional ritual. So consider something like that, and consider using these beads as a way to augment your practice, right? Using these beads as a way to bring you connection and groundedness in your spirituality. I want to leave you with some final insights that I think would be helpful if you're just beginning on this path, or even if you have been using prayer beads for some time. When I first started using prayer beads, and even now, I find that after about 25 to 30 beads, I start getting very agitated. I start feeling very restless. I start feeling like I gotta get up, I gotta move, I gotta go do something. I can't just be sitting here all day. And after about 50, I feel like after about 50 prayers or 50 beads, I'm about ready to crawl out of my skin. And so the practice of using these prayer beads is not just simply about, oh, they look nice, so I like to wear them in ritual. It's about how do I deepen my spirituality, but it's also practicing mindfulness, which is also a core principle in practice in our temple. How do we use mindfulness to improve our spirituality and our spiritual relationship? And so learning to sit with ourselves, learning to sit and be quiet is so important, especially when we're using our psychic gifts, right? When we're engaging in psychic activities and we're using our gifts, it's hard for us to receive messages from our higher power when we're talking all the time, even if it's internal monologue. So when we practice using something like the prayer beads, what we're doing is we're allowing ourselves to ground, to center, to be quiet, to focus on using the energy of our prayers to have a single pointed meditative practice. And actually what that does is it actually helps us to open up that conduit and that connection to the divine. So yes, it can be very difficult and challenging. It seems like it's pretty easy. Well, let me just say a couple prayers and I'll be done. Once you get, like I said, about 20, 30 in, you start feeling it. Once you get about 50 in, halfway in, you're starting to get agitated. And, completing a cycle or a set of the prayer beads, 108 prayers, is not easy. It seems easy. It's just a string of beads. What's the big deal, right? It's not just a string of beads. It represents so much more, and it can be very difficult and challenging to do that. And so this is not only a devotional practice, it's also a practice in discipline and a practice in mindfulness. And so the next time that you sit down with your prayer beads and you decide you want to practice this devotional activity, consider what's coming up for you in those moments. Are they spiritual messages? Are there things going on inside of you that are getting in the way of you being able to be open and be a conduit for spirit? Consider all of that. So I hope that this conversation was helpful to someone, and I hope that you enjoyed seeing, some of the beads that I have here today. And I hope that you consider using this activity as a way to deepen your spiritual practice. And if you're interested in learning more about our view on this, or getting instructions for how to create your own set of prayer beads, you're welcome to check out our lay member practice manual. It's available currently on our WordPress account, fourpillarstemple.wordpress.com, which is a really great resource as well. So check that out, and thank you all for watching. I hope this was helpful. Until next time, signing off for now.